Good morning. We're doing a mock draft. We're going to talk about mock draft strategies. It's not just about the players that are in the draft, but you want to make sure that you leave the draft with the most possible assets or the best possible assets as possible. Brought on Bosch to talk about this. John, first, before we start, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about Fantasy Cares.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I do a lot of work with Fantasy Cares. We help Scott run SFB now. We have the Fantasy Cares Eliminators. Basically, we have tried to form a full charity around fantasy football, which has been going very well. It's very fun. We've had a lot of support from the community, which is awesome. You can follow at Fantasy Cares Org on Twitter. You'll see all kinds of information from us. Right now, we're in the process of announcing the live SFB 14 drafts. So the first new one went out yesterday. There will be other new ones coming soon. So, Dave, I know you drafted in Cincinnati last year, which was hopefully pretty fun for you.
It was amazing. Even if you're not drafting, you need to go out. And I was not drafting. I just came out to hang out with John and the guys, and they did a fantastic job. Not only did you get good food, we were at the brewery location,
Yep.
and so you had different kind of brews. But it was just so much fun. Day from Cincinnati Bengals was there. Just so many great people. I think you had almost 100 people, if not more. But raised a bunch of money. I did a card break. It was a lot of fun. And I know I've seen pictures and stuff and heard stories about all the other locations. It sounds like it's a blast, but great work. And make sure you guys go check it out. If you can, please donate, fantasycares.org. Is that correct?
Yep, that's it.
All right. So let's get to this. So we're going to do a mock draft, but we're also going to talk about strategy, 3 rounds, super flex. John, you got the first pick. Where are you going here?
So at this point, it's kind of a fate of my team. While yes, I definitely am going to take Caleb Williams. If my team is one of those teams where a single player isn't going to solve it, the first thing I'm doing is sending an offer to every other team in my league, literally every other team, because one player isn't going to solve it if you're that bad, even Caleb Williams. If I can't get something done, I'm going to take Caleb Williams because I can keep trying to trade him. Not saying I don't want him. He is definitely the easy 101. But when you're on a team that earned the 101, if it wasn't because of injuries or anything like that, if your roster is just so shallow, it's probably not going to be saved by one player. That is a place to start. But what you see a lot of times is somebody really works hard to tear down their roster to get that 101. They add that 101 player, and then that 101 player just kind of is sitting on their roster, and maybe they get a 104 player next year. And by the time you can't, it's what I'm saying is it's very tough to build just through the draft. Like it's very, very, very.
Yeah, and like last year, Bijan Robinson was the clear-cut 101. And even in super flex drafts, I mean, most people were taking him until like the Anthony Richardson stuff. And I was telling everybody, I said 99% of teams need to trade the 101. And it's not because I don't like Bijan Robinson. It's because you can get so much for it right now. And you're most likely going to, your team most likely needs a lot of stuff. And so, it's similar to what the Bears did last year. The Bears traded the 101. They ended up getting DJ Moore, a boatload of picks, and now they're going to be able to get Caleb Williams. Like, that's how you do it. My question to you, John, is how far do you go back? How comfortable, assuming that, let's just say that quarterbacks go in the top 10 picks. You got J.J. McCarthy goes to either the Giants or the Vikings. You got Drake May going to Washington or Patriots. Jaden Daniels going to Washington or Patriots. Yeah, Caleb Williams going to Chicago. How far are you going if you need a quarterback?
So a quarterback is what I want to get, but I'm also okay if I'm in that complete total building stage, taking anything but running back. So, and at the top of this draft, this rookie draft, we have a lot of good options. I don't mind trading back as far as probably the 107. So if I can, if I am in that space where my team needs multiple assets, I'm looking at like the 107 and I'm asking for, their next year first, hopefully another young player, something like that. I want them to really pay up. Hopefully they need a quarterback in there. That's what kept them out of the playoffs, or that's what cost them the playoffs right at the beginning, whether they're the 106 or 107. And they see Caleb Williams as that leap to a championship, because then I can get the best out of it. So
Yeah.
if I can walk out with having the 101 and trading that for something that gets me a haul of like Brock Bowers and another 2025 first plus another player, that is going to put my team on a pathway to rebuilding a whole lot faster than taking one single quarterback. Believe it or not, in Superflex, you can find cheap garbage quarterbacks and they're going to be okay. Like, you can't build your team around them, but you can build a team while just moving them in and out, like Russell Wilson this year and stuff. Justin Fields, even at this point, go out and get both them. They're going to be a whole lot cheaper. Throw in Baker Mayfield. Like, I know this sounds gross, but this is how I play Superflex sometimes, is I build at all the other positions and then I just change quarterbacks every single year, because there's always somebody getting rid of an old quarterback for a pretty decent pick value.
Yeah, I mean, we see it. You can also do that other positions like running back and things like that. It just, it comes down to cost. And for you to acquire a Joe Burrow, to acquire a Justin, a Justin Herbert, or some of these top guys, it's just cost you so much. And I remember, it was around the trade deadline last year. And yes, we had a trade deadline, and I got Baker Mayfield for like a mid-second. And it helped me go win my league, and then I got he signed a contract, and now it worked out pretty well, because now I got Baker Mayfield as my third quarterback in that league. So, and we started how many? I think it was 61 or 62 starting quarterbacks last year.
That was a lot.
Almost every team had two quarterbacks. So Gardner Minshew was like a top 12 quarterback. He just got paid a bunch of money at Las Vegas. He could end up starting some games this year. Sam Darnold is a guy that could end up starting some games this year.
No way.
I know.
That's too far, Dave. That's too far.
They call it the nasty boys on fantasy footballers, but those are the nasty boys. Josh Dobbs last year. So let's make the pick. Let's go to 102.
I'm clicking on Caleb Williams, and there we go.
There we go.
Now I should be able to draft him, right?
Yeah, you should be able to draft him now. My bad. And we'll see how it goes for the next picks. So here, I mean, there's so much hate out there. If I were to go Marvin Harrison Jr. or you went Marvin Harrison Jr., there's so many people. Yeah, and I don't get it, because at the end of the day, you can't go wrong drafting good players. And I don't think you're losing a whole lot of value. They're like, well, why didn't you, trade back to 104, 105? He may not be there if that's the guy that you want. And I did a Superflex rookie mock draft article, and the first thing when Marvin Harrison was my 101, they were like, clickbait. I wasn't going for that. If you clicked it and it worked, then that's fine. But like, that was not the intention. At the end of the day, Marvin Harrison Jr. has just as much upside as these guys. You look at Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, those types of players, they are in the first round of your Superflex startups. And the fact that like where Caleb Williams is right now, and where Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going right around the same spot in your dynasty startups right now, or at least a 101, 102 are going in that spot. So I'm comfortable taking him here. I do think Jaden Daniels is probably going to be better than Drake May as far as a fantasy prospect. We'll see if he can protect himself. He definitely has some concerning inability to slide. I do think they'll teach that to him in the NFL. I thought that they would teach it a little bit more to Anthony Richardson. So I'm hoping that we see more able to protect himself. Lamar Jackson does a fantastic job. I can't imagine trying to tackle Lamar Jackson. He is so frustrating, where he makes three guys miss, and then you got a clear shot on him. He just steps out of bounds. Jalen Hurts does a pretty good job of avoiding contact. These guys, they do learn how to do that, and they learn how to slide. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm going to take him here. I know it's super flex, but I'm going to go with him. And if you do want him, I think you can. Look at the teams behind you and kind of do your research. You're not going to be able to do that for the entire board. But if I'm sitting at 2 and I see that 3 and 4 are stacked at quarterback, they're probably looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. But if I look at 3 and 4 and they're desperate for quarterback, not everybody's thinking like John, where they can just trade back and I'm getting multiple picks. A lot of people are thinking right now, what makes my team better, and have a little bit of a short-sighted strategy. And I'm going to call 104 and say, hey, I'm going to give you the 102. You can pick your pick of the litter, Drake May or Jaden Daniels, and I'm going to fall back to 104, get a second round pick, get something extra so I can still get Marvin Harrison Jr. and do that. If I desperately need a quarterback and this is a win now situation, I still could end up with JJ McCarthy, or if Drake May falls, because someone likes, JJ McCarthy's situation there if he goes to Minnesota. So I'd be comfortable doing that. John, your thoughts about falling back to 104 if you still needed a quarterback?
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all, actually. This is that goes auto. So
we'll just let it go.
Yeah, I did. All right. So I would do that even at 101. Like that's where I would really want to start. If I am, let's say from the other scenario, if I didn't earn the 101 and I happen to have the 101 because I got it from somebody else that earned it, I don't want Caleb Williams if I'm set at quarterback. So like I'm working real hard to try and target which pick is going to be Marvin Harrison because that's the pick that I want. So I love that thought. And you do have to do this. You have to look at the other teams. You have to know your other managers. You have to try and figure out where are they going to go with their pick. Because if you can figure that out, it gives you a lot more advantage to be able to get what you want for the least amount. And that's how I play. So, yeah. I do this for every single league I'm in. Most of them are auctions, which makes it a little easier. But for ones that are drafts, I definitely look at every other team to find out, okay, I think they're going to go this. This is the player that I want to come out of the first round with. If it's somebody that's above where my pick is, then I am willing to trade up for it. If it's somebody that I'm not above, I will trade back if I can to try and get to that pick, try and get something else out of my current draft spot. I want to leave the players that I want to leave with. So I'll go up or down, whatever it takes. All right, let's see here. So, it went Malik Neighbors and then Jaden Daniels. I have a feeling this is not what we're going to see in Superflex drafts.
Correct.
It seems like that may not have been sleepers not catching up on the Superflex trend. Come on now. All right. Let's be honest. Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, I don't mind either of them above the quarterbacks for exactly what we talked about Marvin Harrison versus Caleb Williams. To me, it's kind of like those two are a tier, and it's just which one do you need more, a quarterback or a wide receiver? If you don't need the quarterback, try to get the wide receiver plus. Same scenario with this next group of 4 players. Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Drake May, and Jane Daniels. They are exactly like that top tier. It's the same scenario. If you need the quarterback, take the quarterback. If you don't need the quarterback, for me, I think it's going to go quarterback, then wide receiver. Yep. So if you don't need the quarterback, trade back. Look at your league, figure out which teams are going to go for those quarterbacks. Move them up to the 3 and the 4. Make sure that the quarterbacks go 3 and 4 so that you can sit there at 5 and 6 and take one of the wide receivers. I do want Neighbors above Odunze. I like Neighbors quite a bit more.
Yeah, no, and I agree. Daniels is going to go, and I do think that the Patriots landing spot is a wild card in this. And people.
Terrifying. Well, it's good if it's quarterback, I guess. I don't want a wide receiver quarterback.
Yeah, people are, they really, really focus on landing spot, And I understand the importance of it. I think draft capital is the most important thing that I'm looking at, but do not fall for the trap. We do it every year. We see a guy that has a clear path that was, maybe he was a player we liked, but now you love him because, Traylon Burks goes and gets the A.J. Brown role, and you're envisioning that in your head, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, and now you're moving these guys from, the second round or the end of the first round into the top 3 or 4 picks. And that's where there's just an overcorrection. And so I do think, I've seen a lot of people say mock drafts and rankings are stupid before the draft. I don't think so. I think it's good to get a baseline, and it's also good to know these players, because at the end of the day, if you like the player and you hate the landing spot, you're going to have to make a decision. But it's good to know and get familiar with these players and have guys that you like and guys that you dislike prior, so you don't just fully rank based on landing spot, because I think it can get you in a lot of trouble. And so I do think that that's going to be a wild card for, if Drake May, because Jaden Daniels, I think if he goes to the Patriots, people are still going to like the fact that he can run. Drake May goes to the Patriots. Right now is his receivers are, is it Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas and John Bosch. I don't really know what they got going on over there yet. It's not as good as you go to a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which, like it or not, it still was good for fantasy. You got Austin Eckler there. You got Zach Ertz. You got Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and they could very likely draft a receiver. They got 2 or 3 second-round picks and 2 or 3 thirds. Yeah, I think 6 picks in the top 100. So it's a much better situation for whoever ends up in Washington, at least right off the bat. And if May and Daniels are neck and neck on your board, I think it would, if May was that guy, he would not be going at 6. He'd be going at 2.
Yeah.
So
I really think the May could go at 2. I think Daniels could go at 2. There is going to be a shuffle from 2 to 6 here. And I honestly, for me, we might as well throw in Brock Bowers too. We left him out of this just because he's a tight end. So it's hard to envision a tight end getting all the way up to 102. It's not for me, because I think Brock Bowers could be at the 102. If I was in a scenario where I was stacked at wide receivers and quarterback, which means I shouldn't be drafting at the 102, but maybe I got somebody else's pick, I would consider Bowers if I can't trade out of it. He is the one that kind of feels like it's the best consolation prize in the world. If you're sitting at 107 and the other 6 players go first, you're getting a guy that could, in some years, be the 101 in a rookie draft. Like, there are plenty of rookie years where Brock Bowers would be really close to that top, no matter who he's against. It just happens this year there are a lot of talented players, and most people are going to favor quarterback and wide receiver before tight end. So for me, I have no problem putting Brock Bowers into the same tier with Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Adunze, and Neighbors. There's probably going to be some argument because he's so good to push him even up closer to that. We have a top quarterback, we have a top wide receiver, and we have a tight end. There's no other tight end that's anywhere close to Brock Bowers in this draft. Neighbors kind of close to Harrison. The quarterbacks, I don't think anybody's going to end up being really close to Caleb Williams, but like you said, with the right scenario, one of them is going to get pushed up and be the 102 most likely in most drafts. So that there's a massive advantage to taking Brock Bowers.
Yeah, and so if you're in the top, we'll say 7 picks, if you want to include JJ McCarthy, it'd be the top 8 picks, that you want to trade into those. And so I know right now it depends on your league and depends on how savvy people are. Right now, people are excited to trade, and some people may be willing to trade out. If you're in the top 7, I'm not trading out unless I get a great offer. Typically, your offers are going to get better on draft day. And I'm going to use those offers to compare to other offers and try to get the best thing. But really, I'm not moving out of that top 7 until I see the draft, because there could be a situation where this board shrinks a little bit. But right now, we got a clear top 7. And then JJ McCarthy is at 8 based on the buzz, because everyone's expecting him to go to a top 10. And I don't think there's a scenario where he gets outside of the top 10. You got the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Vikings at 11, 12, 13. All of them can trade up into the top 10 to go get the fourth quarterback. And the Giants are sitting there at 6. They could go grab them. But, if McCarthy goes to the Giants, I don't think he's going to be jumping up fantasy boards as he would as if he went to Minnesota. So I think that, getting inside that top 7, if you're sitting at 9 or 10, find a way to do it. If you can do it now, before the draft, just try to get in there to lock yourself into one of those guys. And if you're at the 8, 9, 10 spot, I'm trading back. And so let's look at the board. We got Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, Roma Dunze, Drake May, Brock Bowers. I think there's a pretty clear, this is the top guys. Then you have Brian Thomas Jr., J.J. McCarthy, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and then Troy Franklin. I really like those players, and I do think that the majority of those players go in the first round. Maybe one of them doesn't. But I would rather 2 early seconds than one of those guys right now, because I do think there's some really talented players in the early second round, and you still have not seen a running back off the board. You can get a running back and a receiver. We still got the fifth quarterback is still available, but you can get 2 receivers or a running back receiver. I just think trading out from the 109, 110 and getting, 202 and 205, maybe get, additional third, or get, 202 and 206. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we would be able to make a trade. If you're sitting at the 112 and I'm sitting at the 201, I think I'd be offering you just a little something to move from the 201 to the 112. So we would be making a trade real nicely, because I do agree JJ McCarthy is probably going to jump up. If he ends up in Minnesota, I think he jumps over like Brock Bowers or somebody else and makes the 108 become the end of that tier, which is great. I don't want JJ McCarthy, but I love that it pushes somebody else down to a more valuable spot for me. I was hoping a running back would do that from the combine. Like, I was just really, really hoping any running back would show out, just be great at the combine and jump into that top tier, so that somebody else good could get pushed down and I could get somebody I wanted cheaper. It didn't happen. It still hasn't happened for the running backs. After JJ McCarthy, we are looking at this window of, I think these 4 are the next wide receivers. Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Troy Franklin. So I want them more than I want the next tier of receivers. And I definitely want them before any running back ever. I never want the running backs.
And let's be honest, in your actual drafts, somebody is going to reach for running back.
Yes.
If that 111, 112 or 112 team is a contender and they, they're 2 running backs and they need like a third or fourth, they're going to take whoever goes to the Cowboys or whoever is the top drafted running back, which might be the same person.
Yes. And I want them to do that. That's when I'm sitting at the 201. That's what I'm really hoping happened. This is my nightmare, what just happened in this scenario, if I'm sitting at the 201. So that's why I'm saying, if you were the 112 and I'm the 201 and I see these 4 picks before the 112 go off, and I'm like, okay, well, now there's only one of these wide receivers left that I want, because the next pick I'm going to make at the 201, it's going to be a receiver, but it's going to be one that I don't feel as confident in. It's going to be rolling the dice on either Ladd McConkey or Keon Coleman. It's probably going to be Ladd McConkey for me. But I feel way less conviction about that. So I would give up another second. I would rather have Troy Franklin than Ladd McConkey and who did I just say was there? I got to go back to the list.
You said Lad McConkey.
Yes, and Keon Coleman. I had to go back to the list to see who was there. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'd rather have Troy Franklin than both of those two. So that we would make that trade in a real league. If you're at 112 and I'm at the 201, because it's worth it to me. I would give the 201 and the 204, 205 or whatever and jump up to make that pick, because I think there is a pretty clear tier break right there for me. I want the guy that I want. I don't want to just settle and hope that one of the other ones comes up. But we didn't get to make that trade, so I'm going to take Lad McConkey. Yeah, disappointedly, I feel way let down going from Troy Franklin to Lad McConkey right there.
Well, just everyone in the chat, everyone knows that we just traded, and you got Troy Franklin, I got Lad McConkey plus.
All right.
I said I do think you're going to see a running back go into that first spot there, and so I'm going to take my RB1, Trey Benson. He looked very much like a Breece Hall in regards to his combine, but I liked him before the combine, and what I like about him is his ability to catch the ball and do work after the catch. Running backs, I play in almost all PPR, half PPR leagues, but running backs that are staying on the field on third down are getting they're getting a lot more opportunities, and opportunities are king. And receptions are worth 1.5 times what a carry is. So I'm not necessarily worried about a guy there's not many guys out there. They're going to get 300 carries. But if I can get some combination of receptions and carries, and the receptions are, over 50, I think Trey Benson could be that guy. I think he could be the first running back off the board. Obviously, we don't know who the first running back is. And if Trey Benson ends up going to the Detroit Lions and he's stuck behind Dave Montgomery and, Jahmyr Gibbs, it's probably not a great pick. But if he goes somewhere like the Dallas Cowboys or the Chargers, where he could end up taking over the backfield right away, then I think he's going to go in the first round.
Yeah, I think he will be the running back that jumps up. He's my running back one currently, but that's not really saying much. It's running back one only because somebody would have to be there. Like if you literally write down a list, somebody has to be on the top of it. Benson is my top one, but after that, it's really, and I know you said you don't want to let draft spot really be the final tiebreaker. That's going to be the tiebreaker for me on basically all these running backs. If any of them go to an offense where I feel like they're going to end up being, more useful than another player, at this point, running back, of all the players that don't matter, running backs don't matter the most. I really do shuffle my running backs in a way on my teams that I just don't care about them at all. So I almost go out of my way to avoid them. And then I'll overpay later when I really need them. I will fire second round picks at them because second round picks are, most likely not going to work out anyways. So this looks very similar to how I would expect a lot of rookie drafts to go. The second round just filled with running backs. The first round, not any. Maybe one at the 112 if somebody wants to jump up and get their running back. Maybe one of these running backs lands in a really good spot and becomes like a really clear, hey, that person's going to be the, you can't even say bell cow because they're just, you're not even looking at that. That guy's going to get enough carries and enough receptions to be relevant. The others on a good offense. So, whoever that is going to end up jumping to the 201, 202. This is where you're going to see running backs just fly off the board. I was disappointed looking at this full second round because the guy that I was hoping to take at 301 got taken at the 211. So I was hoping for Jatavian Sanders to be sitting there at 301 for me because I think he would be a really, really fun third round pick. I don't mind spending the 211 on him either, but I always like tight end. It's a spot where I just stack my bench with them. And usually I end up having Kyle Pitts or Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews. Like I pay up for tight ends as well because I think it gives you a massive advantage. And then if you develop young ones, you just throw darts at them over and over and over, and you get some that hit, they just become instant value to trade away.
Yeah, and to the point earlier about trading back, like if I wanted a running back, instead of taking Trey Benson at 111 or 112, you can just go and get Jonathan Brooks and Blake Corum at 204, 205 and take more of a shotgun approach because these running backs are such a wild card. You just I want more bites at the apple with this group because, like you said, they're all close together, and I would use landing spot as a tier breaker. Like I'm not bringing somebody from tier 3 to tier 1 because I love the landing spot. But if this guy's in the same tier as this guy and he has a much better landing spot, I agree with you completely. I'm going to move him to the top of the tier and move him up. I'm not going to take Jonathan Brooks over Trey Benson if Trey Benson's got a better landing spot. I think that they're kind of 1A, 1B. And whoever gets the better landing spot, it's going to end up as my number one running back. Because they're so close on my board. And if you asked Twitter right now, who is the RB1, you're going to get, I have asked, and you get 7 different answers.
Yeah.
So let's just recap the second round. And then if there's anything else you want to talk about in the second round, we can go through it. Ladd McConkey, 201, Trey Benson, 202, Michael Penix, 203, Jonathan Brooks, 204, Blake Corum, 205, Keon Coleman, 206, Bo Nix, 207, Braylon Allen, 208, Roman Wilson, 209, Jalen Wright, 210, Jatavian Sanders, 211, and Marshawn Lloyd at 212. And so your thoughts there, John, about the second round. I know you said kind of chalk. You wish Jatavian Sanders would have fell a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you be trying to trade up into this round, or are you okay with what's going on in the third?
At this point, I mean, once you get out of the first, I am doing I have the same approach. It just matters who's on the board. So if I am on the board, if I am on the clock, say early, like I was Ladd McConkey, the approach I'm looking for is literally anybody give me 2 seconds for this 201. I don't care if it's the 204 and the 208. I will take them because I think basically everybody in the second round is about the same. I am willing to just take more shots. Now, if there is, if let's say Adonai Mitchell like somehow doesn't get drafted in the first round, somebody goes up and gets a running back, somebody lets him, slip. Somebody wants one of the other quarterbacks, and so somebody goes up for them. I think that's a mistake, but if somebody does that and like Adonai Mitchell falls down and he's there at the 201, I am looking at here's the rest of my draft. Like here's 2 seconds, 2/3, like take them all. Then you can have all the dart throws. And I just want the one guy. But once we've gotten out of that first round where it's guys that I feel that comfortable with, then it's just about how many of these other dart throws can I pile up? So if you feel like you have somebody that is worth the rest of your draft, I am not afraid to give that up. If I feel that much conviction, I don't feel that about anybody else after the first round here. So I would just be moving back. I do want to take these running backs because I don't want to miss the opportunity to have that value increase, which is what running backs do. If they hit, the running back value will increase on these players. So if I'm early, I'm looking to trade back and just really stock up. If I'm late, give me a couple of thirds in addition to a second and move up, whatever, I do want these dart throws. If I can come out of this second round with 2 of these running backs, if I'm taking one, I want to take 2. Like, I don't want to take just one of the running backs. I want both of them. I mean, say Marshawn Lloyd ends up at like the Bengals or something somehow. Like all of a sudden he becomes real interesting, even though here he went in the 212. Like that's a player I would really, really like. I want that Bengals running back because I don't have faith in Zach Moss and I love that offense. So Chase Brown, he's okay. But like if they bring in a rookie and they show some sort of investment and they want to put draft capital into him, I'm going to go ahead and listen and think, all right, that's a running back I want more in the second now. That's really how I attack it. If there's a guy I really, really, really want, I will give up the rest of my draft, go up into the second and get that player. And then my draft's over. That's fine. But I got the guy that I wanted. I left the draft with who I wanted. If there's nobody that I want, then I just throw volume. I
Yeah.
will just give me as many shots. Hopefully one of them works out. There will be some players that come out of the second round here that are good. It always happens. It's what, like 2 or 3 out of the second round tend to be pretty good. We're likely going to see running backs come out of the second round. One of them is going to end up being, a good running back. A couple of them are going to be good enough. And then the rest of the players are probably misses.
Well, and you look at the actual NFL draft, day 2 is fantasy goodness. There's so many good fantasy players that go there. Quarterbacks, not so much. You don't see a lot of second round, third round quarterbacks these days. Even if they go in the second or third round, they don't always get, you think like last year, people like that Hendon Hooker thought he was going to get a good spot. He ended up going to Detroit and got buried. He's nothing for fantasy value. He didn't end up going a second round, So Bo Nix and Michael Penix, if Bo Nix goes to Broncos and Michael Penix ends up on the Raiders, you're having a really interesting conversation about them in the second round. But if one of them goes to Kansas City and one of them goes to Philly, you're not necessarily as excited.
Yeah, they're nothing then.
So let's talk about third round. Who are you taking here?
Third round, this is pretty easy choice. There's one receiver that I would have thought would have gone in the second round. Maybe one that hopefully would have pushed down Ja'Tavion Sanders to me. But since he's still there, I'll go ahead and just take Xavier Legette. I think he's the best of the remaining bunch. At this point, I'm spending a third round pick. I don't really care. He could be a complete bust, nothing, whatever. But if he's of any value, then he's on my team and I'm pretty happy. It's a third round pick. It's like not hard. So I don't worry too much once we get to this point. It's kind of just thinking, oh, he should have gone in the second, I think. So I feel pretty good getting him in the third.
Well, and so I took Malachi Corley, and I do think Legette and Corley, based on draft capital, are probably going to end up in the second round. Sanders, depending on where he goes, people are going to be more hopeful for fantasy early production with tight ends based on what we've seen the last few years. I mean, Kyle Pitts was great as a rookie. You saw Laporta and Kincaid last year. We even saw, like, if you were to combine Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, that would have been a very good tight end. Just happened to be that one was half the season, the other was the other half.
Yep.
But Sanders, dynamic player with the ball in his hands, and that's what you're looking for a fantasy tight end. You want someone that can catch the ball and demand some targets, but you want someone that can get some yak and put it in the end zone. And speaking of yak, I took the Yak King, Malachi Corley, at the 302. He's not going to go 302 in your rookie drafts because he is a kind of a hype machine right now. I don't necessarily, I hate when Twitter gets in love with a guy and then like everybody's talking about it. So he's probably gonna go a little higher. But sorry about that. But as far as Corley, I've definitely heard people outside of the Dynasty community, Daniel Jeremiah said that like there's probably a lot of GMs and scouts that were happy he wasn't able to go to the combine because he can still stay a little bit under the radar because he's so good. And then he just had his pro day the other day and, he showed out a little bit. So what are your strategies here going into the third round? Is this where you start looking into next year, like try to trade some third rounders for second rounders in 2025?
Yeah. I mean, at this point I'm okay taking dart throws at this point, but I'm really not counting anything at this point on my, as little conviction as I felt in the second round, I feel even less in the third round. So I am really happy in the third round. If I'm sitting at 301 and you offer me a 2027 second, I'm smashing that. Like I will always take that round bump at this point. I am happy to stockpile because one of the approaches I take is I love to always get a round bump. When I am in, trades, sending trades back and forth, one thing that always seals a deal for me is if you give me a bump later down the road, if my 26th third, you bump that to a second, I'll give you my third, you give me your second, because when I do that, eventually I feel like I can someday turn it into a first. And those are the picks I actually care about. Those are the picks that are actually valuable. So right now, if I'm sitting at that 301, then you want to offer me a second anywhere down the road, I feel like eventually I'll be able to turn that to a first. So that's how I look at it. That's how I treat my third round picks. If you're going to force me to take a player, I'm not going to be happy about it. I would rather turn it into an asset that I think has more value for a longer term, because I don't really think the hit rate on third players in the third is all that great. Yes, I know we're all going to hit Tank Dell. We're all going to hit Puka Nacua. Thankfully, I did last year with Puka because so many people were aware of him, like in our little world, but not outside of our little world, which was awesome because it let me have a lot of Puka. I don't feel like that's going to happen every year. If there is one like that, same thing in the second. You know, if there's a guy like I know there's a team that I run with Matt Price, and he loved Puka. And so we basically said, once he was still on the board, I think it was at the end of the second, we were trying to get up there to get him. We couldn't. We eventually, I think, got him somewhere in the third, but we were just offering to try and get up there and take it. So if you do, again, if you have that guy, do it. Package a whole bunch of thirds and fourths or whatever. Sell somebody on the volume of dart throws if you have a guy you really, really feel good about. I don't feel that about anybody yet. I might change that between now and when the actual draft happens, but it's March 29th. I don't feel that about anybody in the third round. So I am really just looking for somebody else make the pick. Give me something I can deal with in the future that's not a player that could be worth nothing in a year.
Yeah, and you know, people want to leave their drafts and they kind of look at their haul of like what players I got. And I mean, look at your assets. And so if you walked away from your draft with one pick, let's say you just ended up with Brock Bowers, but you end up with Brock Bowers plus 225 first, plus 226 seconds, plus a 25 second and a couple thirds in the future. You're looking at it like that if you're a rebuilding team. But even as a competitor, let's say I took 302. I didn't want Corley there. I turned it into a second. Then when I need to make a trade, that second did not get injured. That second is just sitting there on my roster, and John's rebuilding. I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna get Baker Mayfield from you for a second round pick or another player. And so I think that you can use those future seconds as assets on your team. So I'm going to have an empty roster spot so I can take a dart throw for whatever UDFA that I got my sight set on. Let that second round pick sit there on my asset list, and then go scoop up a top guy in the trade market. All right, third round, just to recap before we get out of here: Xavier Legette, Malachi Corley, Bucky Irving, Jalen Polk, Spencer Rattler, Audric Estime, Tez Walker, Jaheim Bell, Will Shipley, Theo Johnson, Ray Davis, and Ben Sinnott. John, what was your favorite pick in the third round?
Favorite pick in the third round other than mine? I really don't have one. Whoever traded back and got two of the guys for one of them. So whoever was sitting at 303 and traded back and got the 307 and the 309. That was my favorite decision made in the third round.
Yeah, or the guy that traded for a second round pick next year. I think Bucky Irving's interesting, and Will Shipley. I think Will Shipley's pass catching prowess is going to move him up boards. He's been getting slept on a little bit. Bucky Brooks just put out his top 5 running back list, and Will Shipley is added to that list. Bucky Irving's a little smaller. Kind of more of like a Tyjae Spears type of player, but he's got some serious juice. So yeah, John, I really appreciate you coming on, and it was fun talking some strategies. Definitely a different approach. When you look at mock drafts, everybody wants to talk about players, but at the end of the day, they're all assets, and you want to go and find a way to improve your team. So where can we find you? And one last plug for Fantasy Cares.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at John Bosch FF. That is where I interact with people the most. come from fantasy football standpoint. So that's where you find me at FantasyCares.org on Twitter. FantasyCares.org is the website. It's time to make sure go to scottfishbowl.com. Make sure you're signed up. Make sure you're registered and signed up. You can't just be registered on the website. You actually have to go click the button to sign up for SFB 14. We have started giving away spots. We've started announcing a lot of live drafts. There's a lot going on. It's movie themed this year, which is fun. Lots of merchandise coming for the movie themes. If you like the SFB-ized logos of things, we've got some really, really fun ones out there this year. So follow all that, donate, have fun. We are really looking forward to this entire SFB season.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing some knowledge, and everybody go get John's guys were Troy Franklin, Jatavian Sanders in the second, and in the third. You need to trade that for a second.
Jatavian Sanders, I was hoping to get it to 301.
Oh, 301.
Don't go giving up your early second for him. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Maybe a 212.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the day. And as always, good luck this season.